There have been rumors for years that SC was sniffing around here or there, but actually doing it is an entirely different matter. So I was surprised. I think when you step back and look at it from a pragmatic standpoint, revenue generation, all of that type of thing, it's understandable for USC and UCLA. But I was surprised by it, and I think the next thing I thought was, what are the next dominoes? Who else goes to the Big Ten? And then how does the SEC answer? And are we headed toward basically two major conferences?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that eventually, but let's get right to it now. What do you anticipate here, especially when we talk about a timeline? Because this is like a little earthquake, and the landscape still hasn't settled. It continues to shift, and it feels like we're going to have a little bit more tremors and earthquakes coming down the road.
I think so, Kevin. There are a couple of things, and a lot of it's complex and confusing and legalese and all of that type of thing. But I would first look toward Washington and Oregon, and the man who broke the story, John Wilner, tweeted that don't expect the Big Ten to be done. My guess is that would be the first place that they would look, and that's something that I would think that Washington and Oregon might be interested in, given the fact, the state of the Pac-12 after SC and UCLA leave, assuming that does indeed become a done deal. Obviously, Notre Dame is always the big one for the ACC, and I think that has a big-time impact on what happens next with the ACC schools. It's been well documented that the ACC has a grant of rights for its member institutions through 2036. The questions, if you ask people around college athletics, is, are those grant of rights really enforceable? But the only way to find out is to take it through the court system. Who's willing to do that? Who's willing to risk that type of money? Does it damage your reputation? What's the cost of that? And does all of that change if somehow, some way, the ACC could, say, convince Notre Dame to join, assuming that the Big Ten doesn't convince Notre Dame to join? Or does Notre Dame sit back and continue to chart its course as an independent as it has throughout its football history, save the one COVID year?
They remain the prettiest girl in the room. Everybody wants to have that dance, and they just sit there and watch and wait. And, of course, they continue to make money. Reese, do you believe this eventual move by USC and UCLA is actually a good thing, though, or a bad thing for the sport?
I think that we give up a lot. I think that we lose a lot in terms of the geographical pride, the regional pride that fans have in their conferences. That's going to be gone. It already is gone to a large degree, but it's going to be completely gone when USC is playing a conference game at Piscataway, someday. So that's going to be over. We give that away, but I think what we're headed toward, Kevin, is eventually college football is going to be self-governed, an entity unto itself more so than it already is, meaning that the other sports might not necessarily be affiliated with the same schools, the same teams that the football program is. So I think we might see an entire seismic shift, to overuse that word that everybody uses on occasions like this, across college sports, meaning that football will govern itself, football will have its own affiliations, football will have its own championship, football will have its own recruiting rules, its NIL rules, its guardrails, its collective bargaining for revenue sharing with television money perhaps. And the other sports will sort of fall under a different umbrella. I guess it's possible that men's basketball could do that, but I think it's more likely, at least for the foreseeable future, that football goes one way, everybody else does something else. What kind of timeline that takes, things are moving really fast right now. So I would think that's a long-term theme, but long-term these days, might be 5, 6, 7 years, and we could, this could be unrecognizable to those of us who grew up with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 or Pac-10 back in the day, playing in the Rose Bowl, and that's just what it was. That might be an unrecognizable thing to those of us of that generation.
Hey, this just accelerated the process and just rip up all the geography and the maps when you look at the conferences now as college football and